we're talking about investment. Of course, I don't give investment advice, but it's always very important to evaluate and try to understand what you're interacting with, the community, the people that are behind it, that kind of thing.
Hello everyone, and welcome yet to another episode of NewForum. NewForum is powered by NewCoin Foundation and is focused on fostering decentralized social applications, also known as Social 3.0, by forming an ecosystem and a community of visionaries, creators, and investors to spark conversations on the topics of crypto and Web3 culture. And on today's episode, we are super excited to welcome Gaspard Peduzzi, the co-founder of Apwine. Apwine is a DeFi protocol allowing to trade unrealized yields. Gaspard will share more about this in a second. He also studied computer science at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Lausanne.
He was also involved in research projects focused on blockchain technologies and cryptocurrencies and built student communities around those topics. Gaspard is passionate about trustless, censorship-resistant systems and information privacy. He works on personal projects related to these themes. Hey Gaspard, thanks for joining us on this episode. We can't wait to begin the conversation with you.
Thank you for the invitation. Hi.
So can you briefly explain how derivatives work in the non-crypto world and what you can do with them in the Web3 world?
Okay, so in the traditional financial world, derivatives are basically pretty simple tools to do more with the regular tools that you have. For example, you in the financial world, you build different tools to exchange value and into a certain condition at certain moments, and you can build strategies around it. And then you add complexity in those, and eventually you build those derivatives that represent a particular thing under a certain condition. For example, a future contract, which represents an exchange of an asset against a determined price at a certain date, certain point of time. And that's actually what we did in the Web3 ecosystem. So we built Apwine, which is a decentralized finance protocol, building derivatives on yield. So basically, we open the interest market in a decentralized environment where we have a liquidity provider that are providing liquidity to different protocols, and that generates yield, interest. And with those derivatives, we give them a tool to speculate on the variation of those interest rates, or to build strategies around it, because then they can hedge their risk, they can build new strategies, they can optimize their yield, and that's basically what we allow in a few words.
That's really exciting. So for me as like a user, I come to Apwine and I look at different projects, and then I can earn kind of interest on, is it kind of like you bet on a project or you bet into a market and then you kind of earn interest, or how would a creator, like I always imagine our community coming to these things. So maybe you can explain like the user journey to it.
Exactly. So let's say that you have a DeFi protocol and it's working somewhat like a company, because it's generating a lot of volume, a lot of people are using it, and then they are taking fees that they're redistributing to other, basically the governance participants, which would be in some ways the stakeholder of this company is. So that protocol is generating interest, and the governance participant, usually through the token of this protocol, are earning those fees that are shared. But those fees are very much volatile. They depend on the activity of the protocol, on the market, and a lot of different factors. And so eventually, as a person, maybe you have a stake in this company, in this protocol, and so you earn part of those rewards, but you would like to hedge your risk, because let's say that currently the yield is very high, but it might evolve and go down, or it might go up, but you would be satisfied with a fixed income. And so going on Apwine, that's basically what we allow you to do. We allow you to secure a rate at which you basically, for a defined amount of time, we allow you to secure a particular interest rate on this. So it can be for a DeFi protocol that is generating yield, but it also can be on other types of yield. So for example, you have lending protocol where you can supply liquidity that will be used for loans, and you earn interest rate on that. Like basically, you play the role of the bank in some ways, but in a decentralized environment, so everyone is the bank at some point. And but those interest rates would be very volatile, and so on that aspect as well, you might want to hedge your risk and fix the rate there. So that's basically what we allow. But that's one category of users, and we have basically three other category of users. We have the traders on the other side that just are looking at those interest rates evolving across time, and they think I don't know, the interest rate on stable coins will rise in the next few months, or maybe that this protocol interest rate will go down because of some other reason, and so they will be able to speculate on the variation of the yield, which was not possible before, because now they can just like basically speculate just on this variation. And so that's one other category of users. And then we have also other protocols directly that will act as user and that will play with those derivatives, that will use them as collateral, that will use them to build strategy, to build vaults, and like automated basically management of strategies that can then be made available for other types of users. And we have also a last type of user that are very key and essential to any kind of DeFi protocol. And those are basically liquidity providers. So liquidity providers are just providing liquidity to those DeFi protocols and earning interest on top of that liquidity, depending on the usage, depending on the fees, the tokenomics, everything that is put in place. But that's basically a very important types of user. And so those one, indeed, they're just providing assets, liquidity to a protocol and earning yield depending on the usage of the platform.
For me, that sounds super amazing for like, you know, just building that, building out your portfolio and really risk management. And I'm thinking about like, how does this differ from like the traditional finance world? Like, what do these Web3 products and like Apwine, what is the difference between the traditional finance models and these Web3 finance models?
Yeah, so to be fair, there are quite some similarities on the one hand, because eventually we have somewhat like a financial ecosystem in DeFi. It's working differently. It's allowing more routes, more paths, so which leads to maybe sometimes quite volatile APYs like interest rate. But eventually, it's there are a lot of financial concepts that are taken from the traditional financial world. And to be fair, when we started the protocol, we did not have a financial background. We did not have the knowledge of this tool necessarily. But eventually, we, with all the DeFi tools, the tools from the decentralized financial space, there was a lot of things that we would be able to do in a permissionless environment. It's just basically finance, but in a decentralized way. Everyone can provide liquidity. Everyone can be the bank. Everyone can get better interest rate because they provide the liquidity directly to the user and not to a third party that is then lending that money with a higher interest rate than the one that you're earning. So we are layered just on top of those protocols. And because those protocols exist, because DeFi exists, and we're just enabling new tools and new strategies to be made for those liquidity providers, for those speculators and traders. But so what you could do with AP1 that you cannot do in traditional finance, well, it's actually speculating on those interest rates, but also generating fixed rates on financial products that are not available in the traditional financial world. I mean, not in the same form. And so, for example, we have very interesting interest rate in the DeFi space, way more than you would have usually with your bank or that kind of thing. And very easily with AP1, for example, we can secure fixed rate in those. And so, yeah, so just it's basically a new paradigm of the financial space, and we plug ourselves on top of that.
That's really interesting, and especially like I'm just like imagining, you know, because like Joy mentioned, our community is mostly made up of a lot of creators. You know, we have a lot of creators, and I'm just wondering, like, who are some of the people that you've worked with, and what has been like, you know, your experience and their experience? Because I know that most artists, or let's just say designers, get intimidated when it comes to anything that has to do with finance, right? And you know, in school we don't really get taught a lot, like unless you're economic or, you know, finance students, you don't really get to learn a lot of these things. So you go into the real world and then you start using the banking, start understanding what credit cards are and what it all entails. And so I guess I'm just wondering, like, yeah, how has the experience been, you know, with your clients or people in Web3 that you work with?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's a very good question because at first glance and at the beginning, DeFi was easy because it was very simple concept made available in the decentralized way. But then eventually things got more complicated and people started to build more advanced tools. And for example, derivatives are part of that. But eventually you have several types of users. And that's also something that you have to take into account and while building a product. For example, we talked about derivatives, about interest rate market and that kind of thing. But at the same time, you know, when you interact with Apwine, it can work like an advanced paycheck mechanism. You can come with a USDC, which is a stable coin pegged to the US dollar, and basically giving 1,000 USDC, you can get like already an advanced paycheck, like money right now, and then you will receive your deposit in, for example, 90 days, but you already get an advanced interest rate. And that's very simple actions and something that anyone can understand. And at the same time, behind the curtains, there are a lot of things that are happening while you do that. And you would be able to do the same strategy interacting at a lower level with the protocol, but that's made available mostly for more advanced users or for other protocols that want to build the strategy to make them available to the users. So we have a lot of work and challenges in terms of UX, UI, making that easy to understand. But at the same time, it's normal that there is a part of the protocol and a part of all the concepts that are complicated because eventually it's to make them efficient as well. And it's to make them modular and composable and to allow a lot of possibilities. Often decentralized finance is compared to money Legos because at some point that's what we do. And as I mentioned already, when we started with that idea in August 2020, we were just thinking, so people are making money through interest, depositing funds on one platform to another, but those interest rates are very volatile and they have no way of hedging that risk. And some people are saying like those interest rates are crazy, they're going to go down, or those interest rates are very low, they are going to go up. But no one had any way, any tool to be able to express that knowledge or information into actually value or strategy. And so that was the goal. And so as building a DeFi product, you always want to keep it to keep your protocol at a low level, but then to make strategy and to interact with other protocols that will make strategy available for the end user very easily. And eventually there is this goal of being very low in terms of layer, and eventually the same way you use a lot of products in your everyday life, you don't realize the complication and all the things that are being built behind the curtains to actually make that a reality. And in the financial world, it actually works like that a bit. When you make a loan or when you pay with your debit card, you don't necessarily understand everything that is happening behind. I would say that the good thing with decentralized finance is that eventually you can, it's very transparent and modular. The whole process can be retraced. If you want to go deeper and understand what the product are made of, why do you have this interest rate, why are you able to do that or that, like that you can trace, that is transparent, and that you can actually build with as well. And so transaction of value and just the composability of all those things are actually way easier to build with. And that's why then at the end of the day, it's money Lego, and it allows people to make some kind of arbitrage between people providing liquidity to other people for different types of financial instruments, and the traditional financial world where you go to a big actor that will basically be the intermediary and have the monopoly on deciding what to offer to user because they can have the liquidity on the other side.
So I'm also, since we're talking a lot about DeFi, I'm wondering if what do you think? Do you think that DeFi is making wealth building and investing more accessible to a wider range of people, and why? Because when we talk about DeFi, there's this idea of this bankless idea, there's no middleman. And so perhaps this is something that can allow for more accessibility when you think about various countries and, especially even war-torn countries and just everything, happening even currently and all. So what do you think about that? Do you think it's impacting this?
I do think it's impacting this, and I think it makes that possible. I would not say it's the current case. Accessible is a big word, and we often working in DeFi, we often think it's sometimes it can be very easy and very transparent and other things, but actually for a regular person not involved in directly working and building with those technologies, it might not be that accessible, but I think it eventually will. And I think this way of, I think DeFi creates new paths of for the value to transact between different actors. And I think by creating those paths, it will indeed reach the end user that was not able to interact or transact value with the traditional financial ecosystem and space and the current economical paradigm, let's say. So yeah, I do think it's creating new paths. I do think eventually it will make this idea of providing value transaction to those people that the bankless people, and I do think it will help in that aspect. But I think we still have a long way to go as well.
From like a technical perspective, how does the protocol function, and like how do you think also like tokenized and trade future yields work? Like how does that work in a technical sense?
Well, when you build a DeFi protocol, you build a set of smart contracts that are basically programs that act in a more or less autonomous way. So basically, let's say that you want to build a protocol to make loans, then you have to write the program that enable one to deposit money and one actor to deposit money and one actor to withdraw the money. Well, for the interest rates, the way we do that is people deposit basically interest-bearing tokens. So interest-bearing tokens are tokens that represent a deposit somewhere. So for example, if you deposit in a lending protocol, you earn interest-bearing tokens that represent that deposit. And so basically, whoever owns those interest-bearing tokens are receiving the interest made from that deposit, from that action. And we take that's the proof of deposit, basically, and we tokenize it, splitting that into. On the one hand, we split what was representing the initial deposit, and on the other hand, we capture what will be the yield that will be generated by this deposit. And then because we split that in tokens, it becomes a very easy way of exchanging either the value of the principal, the initial deposit, or the yield that is directly generated. And so that's basically the technical approach. Of course, then there are more complicated things as you go into new derivatives. You need to build a marketplace for those tokens as well. So we create an automated market maker, but then it needs to be efficient because people need to provide liquidity to that exchange. So they need to have it needs to be interesting for them in terms of potential risk, in terms of potential return, that kind of thing. So that's also a component, a core component of the protocol. But then eventually it's just, yes, a set of smart contracts. And of course, then you have the whole aspect about decentralized governance, because for a protocol to be decentralized, it needs to be decentralized in its execution. So that's more on the side of the smart contract, but also on the way the project is managed, on the way the community is interacting, and the community as well. And all those things eventually makes it efficient. And the network effect in decentralized finance is very much important as well, because as I said, if you're building a Lego in DeFi Lego ecosystem, then you need to be able to be plugged on top of something and to plug yourself on top of something else.
Yeah, and from like from a personal side, like, do you also invest into DeFi, and like, what are some of your other favorite projects out there? I'm curious to know.
Yeah, of course, I'm invested on personal levels. I've been following this like cryptocurrencies in general since quite a long time, and in terms of project that I'm interested about, I think there are a lot of projects that are very interesting, but I like those that are a little bit experiment. For example, there is one called Paladin, and it's basically tackling a lot of governance challenges in a very interesting way. Basically, because those decentralized protocols have built decentralized governance that are pretty much experiment at this point, and this is tackling a lot of aspects. Basically, how do you like the value of a vote, and how do you profit from it, and from that kind of perspective. I think there are a lot of very interesting projects building some kind of yield aggregators. Basically, they build those strategies that I was talking about, so making that very accessible and easy for the user to take advantage of. So, for example, Staked Out kind of project. And then you have just a lot of project. Tokenmark is a decentralized market maker, basically tackling the liquidity and market making issue in a decentralized context. And then just a lot of projects. I could talk a long time about that.
Well, that's really cool that to hear about some of the projects that you've invested into. And well, speaking about projects you've invested into, I'm wondering if you've ever gotten hacked, or have you had any experiences with that, or when you invested in a project, and what do you think people can do to see red flags in advance and prevent such things from happening, like being rug pulled and all that stuff that we hear or we read about happening in the space, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean that's very much an aspect that is popular about the space as well. Unfortunately, is that as it is new, as it is iterating quickly, we often see security breach, left unproposed or not. Sometimes it's actually reported. Sometimes it's very the intention of the dev were malicious. It's never something that you can be sure of. It's definitely something that you need to be careful about. Then there are necessary steps in the development of the project, and that includes security audits by very known and actor that you can trust. Then, of course, if we're talking about investment. Of course, I don't give investment advice, but it's always very important to evaluate and try to understand what you're interacting with, the community, the people that are behind it, that kind of thing. And then I would say in general, just doing risk management on the investment, but meaning also not necessarily even buying the token. When you provide liquidity to a protocol, you have to know that there is always a risk of this protocol to be hacked or that kind of thing. And at this point, you have to just be very careful about those different processes. Do not put all your money in the same bag of protocol, that kind of thing. It's definitely things that people that have been investing and very present in that space have learned maybe the hard way. Of course, providing liquidity to different protocols, or investing into different protocols, or even putting money in different decentralized exchange in different exchanges. I had the experience of losing money because of that, because of those issues. But that's kind of the risk of being early at the same time, or to when you want to be the first somewhere, then eventually you have some consequences with that. But just really be careful, because there are no guaranteed returns. There are no guaranteed returns, and it's very easy to deploy a protocol. It's very easy to deploy a protocol anonymously, and you have to be careful and not to fall into obvious traps. But also just in general, there is nothing that is sure completely, which is the case not only with crypto, of course, but something that you have to be aware of.
Well, thanks for sharing that. And when in the beginning we had introduced you, and we mentioned that you were involved in research projects focused on blockchain technologies and cryptocurrencies, and you build student communities around those topics. And so is this what it's obvious that you're really driven and you're really in the space, and you're part of you're playing a major role in shaping this space, in the financial aspect of it. And so I'm wondering, what kind of helped you carve this passion in crypto? I'd say I think I'll be quite curious to hear that.
Well, I was always very interested by actually information privacy and trustless systems, in a way, as a counterpart maybe to different things. And the layer of transacting information and the layer of transacting value was very interesting from a different point of view, and maybe what it would involve for different kind of systems, society, and I was just very interested by the consequences in what you can improve by improving this layer between people of different communities, different places, and from a technological point of view, decentralized systems, consensus algorithm, that kind of thing, is very, very interesting. I did the computer science studies, and that's the subject that I was mostly interested about. So of course, cryptocurrencies were very interesting. Of course, decentralized finance was very interesting, and so I was always very much attracted by the subject, and And then during my studies, I started to build communities of students that were also interested in the subject or that were very much aware of those or not at all. And then eventually it evolved and started to build some project and hackathons, that kind of thing, meeting more people of the space as well, and doing some research, because that's something that has a place in the academic world as well. And yeah, and eventually it led to meeting my co-founders and to getting the idea of Apwine, and here we are now. So that has been definitely a great journey.
That's amazing. We've had such an informative, educative conversation, really, because most of the time, at least, I'm like a super creative person, and Joy is as well. And having this conversation about cryptocurrency, DeFi, derivatives, and all that, it's really important, to know about it. So we really appreciate this conversation, and we really can't wait to have more of such conversations with you, maybe in the future. But thank you so much for your time with us today. And I'm wondering, where can our maybe you can leave like a few, maybe like last few words to our community, because I think it would be nice to just like leave some few words with them, and then maybe you can tell us where we can find you on your social media.
Yeah, I mean, for those interested, you can follow Apwine and myself on Twitter and of course the different social media. And if you're interested about those technologies, then I would invite you to check online. There are a lot of resources to learn. I think that's very interesting. I would invite them to be careful as well, because of the reason that we discussed, but I think it's definitely something that they should be aware of. And for those that are interested, they can always reach to me and to the team, and we'd love to provide more information or educational resources to help building new tools in that space if they want to as well. That would be, we would be very keen to do that.
Perfect. And do you have any last words for our community listening to you now?
I mean, that would be
it.
Yeah, just
okay.
I think it's a very open space, and so they are very much welcome, and we would love to have them understanding or building that space.
That's perfect. And we'll put all his links in the description below.
Yeah, thank you so much, Gaspard. I think it's so important to educate people about DeFi and financial literacy and wealth building, and how you can really hack these things within Web3 and how you can make it fun. And it's cool to see someone out there building like the infrastructure and making this possible for people. I'm really excited about it. I'm going to read more about it. And thank you everyone for being part of today's forum. If you want to get more involved also within our community, we leave all of our links down below. We are on Twitter, we are on Instagram, and we also have a private Telegram group, and we're going to leave all these links down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe, and we're going to be here in the next episode. And thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you, Salimi, and thank you, Gaspard.
Thank you, Joy. See you next time.